Daf is Yud Base, Daf 12, and we are going to do 11b just at the Gemara. Rabbi Meir said that the chametz, we have 1 hour buffer where you have to burn the chametz before the Torah prohibition sets in, and which is at noon, at midday, and so the entire 6th hour, meaning from 11 to 12 o'clock, you may not consume chametz, or you may not have it anymore. You have to burn it. And Rabbi Yehuda says actually you can't consume it for an hour before that. You need a 2-hour buffer. So Gemara is going to go through in another place where we have a machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda in regards to the likelihood of someone making a mistake in time. And the Gemara is going to analyze that and figure out how much is a likelihood that someone looking at the sky to figure out what time of the day is would make that mistake. Tanan Hasam. So we learned over there in regards to testimony in a capital crime. Somebody got murdered. Somebody witnessed that murder. Two witnesses see the murder, and they have to tell a time. As the Gemara is going to tell us later, that there are 7 things that they have to know exactly. They have to know what time of the day it was, what day of the week it was, what year it was, what year in the Shemitah it was. So they have to know the time of the day. And the time of the day, obviously back then, they would look at the time based on, the time would be checked based on looking at the sun. So Tanan Hassan, we learned over there, if they made a mistake, if one of them made a mistake and said, they agreed that the murder took place on a Monday, but one said Monday was the 2nd of the month, and one says Monday is the 3rd of the month, and there's a kayamis. That testimony stands. Because one knew when Rosh Chodesh was, and one doesn't. And our Rosh Chodesh is based on, it's not a set Rosh Chodesh, but rather it's based on whether there's 29 days or 30 days in the previous month. And so since it's not always the same, they may not have known that the previous month, one of them may not have known that the previous month was either an extra day or a day less. And so as long as they said it's the same day of the week, it doesn't make sense that they would not know the exact what the date was. However, if they made a 2-day mistake, one said that it was on Monday the 3rd, and one said it was on Monday the 5th, so then the testimony is not correct and is not accepted. What happens if they made a mistake in regards to how the time of the day? So one said it was 2 halachic hours into the day. So that would be assuming it was an equal day. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. is the day, and you divide that into 12 parts. So one said it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and one says it was 9 o'clock in the morning, 2 hours into the day, 3 hours into the day. There, the testimony would stand. However, if one says it's 3 hours into the day, and one says it's 5 hours into the day, at that point, the testimony is going to be considered void. That's the opinion of Rabbi Meir, whether attributed in the Mishnah or unattributed, and usually an unattributed statement is Rabbi Meir. So we leave this as Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Yehuda says edusan kayemes. No, the fact that they made a 2-hour, there's a 2-hour discrepancy is not enough to say that the testimony is invalid. Rather, that testimony still stands. However, if there's a 2-hour discrepancy from before noon to afternoon, at that point the testimony is void. Because now that's something they should be able to tell, because the sun is at the other part of the sky in the morning. Before noon, the sun is in the east, and now and at 7, the sun is in the west. So, while the sun is in the east, to know exactly how high up in the sky it is, that's a 2-hour discrepancy that they can make a mistake. that there can be an understandable mistake, but not so if it's before and afternoon. So Rabbi Yehuda says that 2 hours uh, um, is not going to invalidate it if it's within the same side of the sun, meaning either from sunrise to noon or from noon to sunset, but not if the 2 hour discrepancy takes them from before noon to afternoon. So that's the Mishnah over there, and we're going to have a couple of interpretations as to what the understanding of these discrepancies in the halacha between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda is. Amar Abai, Kashatim Tzalemer, L'divrei Rabbi Meir, Ein Adam Tayv V'lo Klum. We could explain and analyze and say that really people don't. Rabbi Meir does not allow for any amount of discrepancy between the testimonies. And L'divrei Rabbi Yehuda, Adam Tayv Chatzisha. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, people would make a mistake up to a half hour. And the explanation for this is so it explains like this. Rabbi Meir, in the explanation of Rabbi Meir, we would say, "Ein adam tov v'lo klum." People are the two witnesses are not making any mistake. Ma'asa ki hava b'meipach tarati u'mayil tlas. It's at the end of the second hour and the beginning of the third hour of the day. V'hadakam shtayim b'sof shtayim. And when they're simply referring to different parts of the time. When the one witness said it was 2 hours into the day, he meant at the end of 2 hours into the day. And when one said it was 3 hours into the day, he meant it's the beginning of the third hour. And so Rabbi Meir doesn't allow for any discrepancy or any mistake in what time of the day it was, but only in a re-explanation of the meaning of their words. And L'divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that a person would make only up to a half hour mistake in where the sun is at. And therefore, the explanation of this 2 hour discrepancy is this. So the mistake, the occurrence happened at middle of the fourth hour. Let me just share a screen here. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's the middle of the fourth hour. So to us, that would be like 10:30. Sorry, 9:30. At 9:30, middle of the fourth hour, is when the murder happened. And the one witness who said that it happened at 3 o'clock, at 3 hours into the day, he meant at the end of the third hour into the day. That's when this happened, and he was only off by a half hour. So not the end of the third hour being at 9 o'clock, what we would call 9 o'clock, that's when it happened. And the murder actually happened at 9:30, so he was off by a half hour. And the one who said 5 o'clock, 5 hours into the day, meant at the beginning of the fifth hour. The beginning of the fifth hour is a half hour off from the mid of the fourth hour, and it also only made a mistake of a half hour. So each one made a half hour mistake, plus the explanation that one was dealing with the beginning of the fifth hour, one is dealing with the end of the fourth hour, the third hour, which is the beginning of the fourth hour. So they're only actually a half hour off. And if the murder took place midpoint between the discrepancy, so each is only a half hour off, and that would make sense. That according to Rabbi Yehuda, even though one said at 3 o'clock and one said at 5 o'clock, they're half of it, an hour. Is just by explaining their words to mean one is at the end of the third hour, one's the beginning of the fifth hour. So there's still a 1 hour discrepancy, and that's because each one made a half hour mistake in looking at the sun, knowing what time it was. So the Gemara says, one who said 3 meant the end of 3. And he's making a mistake about a half hour. A half hour ahead. b'tchilas chamash, and the one who said that it happened at 5 o'clock, he meant at the beginning of the 5th hour, at the end of 4 hours into the day. And he was mistaken, he was a half hour ahead of when it actually happened. So that's the one explanation in this machlokas. And according to this, Abaye would say that, according to Rabbi Meir, people don't make any mistakes in telling time by looking at the sun. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, make a half-hour mistake. And that would be acceptable in the testimony. And some say the same idea, but that there was a little bit of a discrepancy in time. So people wouldn't be exact, and therefore it could be that they're a little off. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, there would be a mistake of a shah, 1 hour and a little bit. So that there's a little bit of a discrepancy according to people. That the occurrence actually happened not exactly at 2 hours, at the end of 2 hours into the day, but rather either slightly before that or slightly after. Meaning, if it's 6 to 6, so then it would be at 8 o'clock, but not at 8 o'clock exactly. It may have happened a few minutes before 8 or a few minutes after 8. And a little bit into the 3rd hour, and one of them got it right, and one of them is off by a few minutes, by a little bit, into if it actually happened at the end of the 2nd hour. So the one who said at 3 hours into the day meant the beginning of the 3rd, and it was really a little bit before that, or the one who's, if it happened a little bit after 8, meaning a little bit into the 3rd hour, the one who said 2, meaning the end of the 2nd hour, was also mistaken. But again, Rabbi Meir is re-explaining their words, that when one said the 2nd hour and one said the 3rd hour, the one who said the 2nd hour meant the end of the 2nd hour, and one who said the 3rd hour meant the beginning of the 3rd hour, and so they're really almost at the same time. L'divrei Rabbi Yehuda, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that there would be a 2-hour discrepancy, Adam Toyosha Umashu, really their mistake is only by, whoever made the mistake only made a mistake by an hour and a bit, and that's the max of an allowable mistake. And the occurrence that happened either at the beginning of the 5th hour or at the end of the 3rd hour. In the beginning of the 5th hour and the end of the 3rd hour is really only an hour and a bit of a discrepancy between them. The beginning of the 5th hour is really the end of the 4th hour plus a little bit, and the end of the 3rd hour is just an hour and a little bit off of that. So their discrepancy would be the set. Now we turn to 12a, Yud Beis Amud Aleph. And one of them is simply an hour off, an hour and a little bit off, and one of them got the time exactly right. So Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, repeated Abaye's interpretations in this machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, and said it in front of Rava. And Rava challenged this and said, wait, why in the world would we reinterpret their words to make it work? If you tell me that it's not common for a person to make a mistake greater than an hour or even a half hour, according to Rabbi Yehuda, or nothing, or just a little bit, according to Rabbi Meir, so why are we reinterpreting their words to make it fit when it's a capital crime? We should be looking to see that it must fit exactly. And if they didn't say the same thing, why are we reinterpreting one to mean the end of the 3rd? When he said 3 hours, he meant the end of the 3rd hour. When he said 5 hours into the day, he meant the beginning of the 5th hour. And really, there's only an hour in between. Why are we doing that? If we had been precise with the words of these witnesses, and when the one said at 3 o'clock, he meant the beginning of the 3rd hour into the day. And if the one who said 5 hours and they meant the end of the fifth, right? We could just as well say that they mean the opposite. And then there's a 3-hour gap between them. And then their testimonies are non are opposing each other. Their testimonies really contradict each other. And we would not put this person to death. We would not convict him on this capital crime. And we're going to convict someone of a capital crime based on reinterpreting their words to be close enough to mean that they are that indeed the testimony fits. Why are we doing that? But the Torah had said the Beis Din must judge, and they must seek to save this person from a capital punishment. And you're doing the opposite. You're looking to try and interpret their words to match, as opposed to that they shouldn't match. Elama Rava, rather Rava says, if we're going to really look at the words of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, we're going to have to say that they agree that there are some amount of there is some time that people make mistakes by looking at the sky, and they will make a mistake in knowing what time it is. That actually, according to Rabbi Meir, that people will make up to 2 hours, a little less than 2 hours, chasar mashu, a little less than 2 hours of discrepancy, up to 2 hour a mistake in looking at the sky and knowing what time it is, they wouldn't make, but up to 2 they would make. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, a person would make a mistake of up to 3 hours, meaning a little less than 3 hours. The Gemara explains. So what's the meaning of, according to Rabbi Meir, a person would make up to a 2-hour mistake, meaning 2 and minus a little bit. So what was the scenario? So the occurrence happened somewhere between the beginning of the second hour of the day and the end of the third hour into the day. And therefore one is making a mistake by up to 2 hours, and that's why according to our mayor, one said it happened at 2, one said it happened at 3, and their mistake is because it happened somewhere in those 2 hours, and they could be making up to a 2-hour mistake. L'divrei, so the witness who said that that this happened at the second hour, at most is just going to be off by 2 hours. The one who said it happened at the beginning of the third hour, again, would only be off by at most a little less than 2 hours. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, Adam Toya Shalosh says, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, a person could make even a 3-hour mistake in what time it is in the day, looking at the sun, but up to 3, a little less than 3. So Maisa Kihava, so this occurrence, when did it happen? The occurrence would have happened either at the beginning of the third hour, meaning at the end of 2 hours into the day, plus a little bit, or as late as just an hour before noon, a little more than an hour before noon. And one of them, and it can happen anywhere in that time, and at max, even if it happened at the beginning of the third hour into the day, and the one who said 5 hours meant the end of the fifth hour, even if he meant that, it's no more than 2 hours and 59 minutes, a little less than 3 hours of mistake, and so therefore it still counts, because that's within the norm that a person would misinterpret the sun in the sky. And so there's no more than a 3-hour mistake in the sky. It's actually less than 3-hour mistake in the sky, because even if we interpret the one who said 3 o'clock, 3 hours in the day, the beginning of the third hour, and the one who said 5 hours into the day did the end of the fifth hour, nevertheless, the discrepancy would be no more than a 3 hour or less. It would be actually less than a 3 hour discrepancy. So we now have, according to Rava's interpretation, that according to Rabbi Meir, the max mistake a person can make is a 2 hour mistake looking at the sky, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, a 3 hour mistake. So now we're going to look at our Mishnah where everybody agrees that you only have to burn the chametz 1 hour before noon, and Rabbi Meir says you can eat chametz until that point, and Rabbi Yehuda says you actually have to stop eating chametz at 2 hours before. So Tanah. Sorry. Before we get to our mission, we're going to go into.
Could I ask a question?
Sure, 1 second. But before we go into our mission, we're going to go into just the system of checking witnesses. There would be 2 types of questioning of the witnesses, and we'll see that in a moment. Yes, Mike.
My question is, every Shabbos, some people keep 18 minutes, some people 20 minutes before Shkia, we light candles. It's kind of, that's the cutoff. Mm-hmm. We want be moisif mikodesh l'chol, or just keep people away from making a mistake, whatever. But there's a 18 to 20 minute window to keep people from transgressing Shabbos. Here, the whole thing is getting rid of chametz so that they can bring a korban later, and you have to be rid of your chametz to bring the korban. So, why so long? I mean, really, I mean, I understand we got kind of an acrosting with, but while we're talking about time, we're talking about Adim, etc. But if you missed it by 10 minutes or 20 minutes, you still got like 3 or 4 hours to bring your korban.
You're mistaken. No, you make a mistake. No. Michael's question is that, look, I don't have to bring my korban until sometime in the afternoon, so why do I have to burn my chametz by noon? Is that the question?
No, well, that's kind of not that. I mean, that's kind of built into the question. But the question is, okay, so I missed it by 15 minutes. I still got
missed what?
Getting rid of my chametz. I still got 3 hours. The reason I need to get rid of my
Why do you have 3 hours?
I'm saying, let's say I had 3 hours, and I missed it by 15 minutes.
But you don't have 3 hours.
Why not?
Because at noon there's a Torah prohibition of owning chametz.
Oh, that's right. Because well, we darshan that.
It's because the Torah says that you can't bring your korban when you have chametz, and the Torah tells us that and we know that the korban can be brought from noon, so therefore you can't have chametz from noon. That was one of a couple of ways we saw that in the Gemara. So from noon there's a Torah prohibition of owning chametz. You can't have chametz in your possession anymore. So this is really just the time to get rid of the chametz. So back to.
So if you blew it and you missed noon by 15 minutes,
you're actually Torah transgression of owning chametz. Correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the Mishnah in regards to witnesses says this. Tanan, there were 7 basic questions which are called chakiros, and then there are drishos which are seeking more information. The chakiros were like this: Be'ezeh shavua, in which year of the Shemitah cycle, which is a 7-year cycle of 6 years working the land and the 7th year being a fallow. So which year of the Shemitah cycle? Be'ezeh shana, which year? Which year of the Yovel? There was 7 Shemitahs in a Yovel. So which year? Which Shemitah cycle? Which year within the Shemitah cycle? Be'ezeh chodesh, which month of the year? Bekama b'chodesh, how many days in the month? Be'ezeh yom, which day of the week? So was it a Monday or a Wednesday? Be'ezeh shah, what time of the day? Be'ezeh makom, and in what place? Those are the 7 questions that each witness has to on their own has to testify and concur with the other. Utanan, and we learn further. Ma ben chakiros lebedikas. What distinction is there between the chakiros, which are the 7 basic questions, and the bedikas, the check questions that we would check and seek out more information? Chakiros, by the chakira, echad omar echad mehem eni yedea. If one of the witnesses says, actually, I'm not sure about that. I don't know what time it was. I don't know which day of the week it was. The testimony is null and void. Bedikas, but in regards to the further questioning, even if both say, well, each one says, I don't know, but I don't know that, it would still be valid testimony. So if you ask, what was he holding in his left hand while he did this crime? And each one said, actually, I don't know what he was holding in his left hand. That would still be a valid testimony. And the Gemara analyzed this and thought about this, said, wait, what distinction is there between these original 7 questions, which are called hakiras, the basic questions, and the further testimony, and the further questioning? There's a concept in halacha that every testimony has to be hazama-able. Hazama is the ability for 2 witnesses to come in and say, that witness, even though he said he was in this place at this time when this occurrence happened, actually he was with us at another place. So the ability to be able to contradict the testimony by saying that the witness was elsewhere at that point. Every testimony has to be able to have hazama, have 2 witnesses come in and say that it couldn't have happened because the witness was not there at that time. And any testimony that cannot have hazama is not a valid testimony. And so these 7 are required in order to be able to say so and so. The witness has to be able to say I was in this place at this time, and therefore 2 witnesses can come in and say, no, you were elsewhere at that time. And if they're missing any of the first 7, it's going to be testimony that's non-hazam-able. It's not able to be contradicted by these witnesses. However, bedikas, the rest of the questioning will not place them at a specific place in time, but rather will tell you something that went on during the crime, the occurrence. And there, it's not necessary to know that in order for the contradiction of the testimony for the hazama. Bedikas, but the bedika is going to be testimony. It will still remain, as long as you know the time and place, that still remains as a testimony that could have hazama. Now, the Gemara challenges Rava and says, if you say that a person can make a 2 or even 3 hour mistake in what time it is, now you can't do hazama, because if he had said it happened at 3 o'clock, 3 hours into the day, and witnesses come and say, oh, at 3 hours in the day you were actually with us elsewhere, and I say, okay, so then I guess it was 4, I guess it was 5. I mean, I can make that mistake. If you say people make such the discrepancies in people's mistakes could be that great, even though you asked what time it was, it's still not going to be able to be hazama da amri, because they can say, we made a mistake. Because we can give each one a full mistake. And if we give each one a full mistake, so the one who said 3 actually could have happened at the beginning at the end of the first hour of the day. Because if you can make an up to 2 hour mistake, and he said at 3, so it could actually have been at 1 hour into the day. And the one who said that it happened at 4 hours into the day. The one who said 2 hours in the day, it could have happened an hour into the day. And the one who said that it happened 3 hours into the day, actually we can extend it that there was a 2 hour mistake, it would be 5 hours into the day. And so from the beginning of the first hour, meaning from the beginning of the day, all the way to the end of the 5th hour, which is an hour before noon. They could have. That's the discrepancy. And so, how are you going to prove that these witnesses were elsewhere during the crime? Actually, this allows them a full 5 hour time that this crime could have happened. And so there's really no way of hazama in such a case. And the same applies to, according to Rabbi Yehuda. But first, the Gemara interrupts that and said, by the way, really, we could have given the one who said that the crime happened at 2, we could have said it happened even earlier. Right? But then with the Nesav Lahumi Karat fate, we can even be earlier in the day, but that would already be night. That would move it into nighttime, and people don't make a mistake between dawn and 2 hours into the day. So that would not be a valid mistake. People don't make a mistake between night and day. So it would have to be that the maximum that we would say, the one who said that this happened at 2 hours into the day, that it meant at when it was already light. But nevertheless, there is a great discrepancy there, and we couldn't really pin them down and say that they were, the alibi doesn't work, because you have the witness coming in and say, 2 witnesses coming in and say, you were with us at for a coffee at 9 o'clock, and he says, oh yeah, it actually happened 2 hours later than that, and it still fits within their testimony. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, that they can have a 3 hour discrepancy. So they actually can go as far back as the beginning of the day and as far ahead as noon. And it can even go really earlier because it's a 3 hour discrepancy. And he had said that it happened at 3 o'clock, according to Rabbi Yehuda. That could go back into dawn. But again, the same idea, and we turn the page to Yud Beis Amud Beis. Of course, people know whether it's dark out or light, and so that far back we can't go. But at least we can move. Even though you said that this occurrence happened at 3, and witnesses show up and say, "Oh, 3 hours into the day you were with us." You say, "Oh, actually, I meant 1 hour into the day, or even as far back as the beginning of the day." And really can go even beyond noon. But however, when they said that it happened at 5, the sun is still on the east side. And now afternoon, the sun is already the other side. It's casting a shadow the other direction, and therefore there's people don't make that kind of mistake. And so, but the entire morning is within their leeway to re-explain themselves if 2 witnesses show up and say, you were with us elsewhere. And therefore, it should be so this discrepancy goes that far. So the Gemara had said, all this really is Yavinalu Kula to Usai. All the witnesses would have to testify and say, correct, from the morning until noon, according to Rabbi Yehuda, or from the morning until an hour before noon, according to Rabbi Meir, these witnesses were with us. And that's how it's Yachalazi. Because of that, so the discrepancy, according to Rabbi Meir, that these witnesses can wiggle out of, is going to be the 5 hours of the morning, and according to Yehuda, the entire 6 hours in the morning, and yet it's considered Eidos Sheyachal Azima. It's testimony that can be contradicted because 2 witnesses can come in and say that entire morning you were with us elsewhere. You say it happened sometime in the morning, in this place. You were with us elsewhere that entire time, the entire morning, another place, and that's Yachal Azima. So it's still a valid testimony because it could be contradicted. So on the third line of Yud Beis Amud Beis 12b, and now we bring this back home to our question about checking for chametz or destroying the chametz. Not checking for chametz, destroying the chametz, and the prohibition of eating chametz. Tanan Rabbi Meir oimer eichlin kol hay v'sefer mitchilas vav. Rabbi Meir says you eat chametz until the end of the 5 hours into the day, and you have to burn the chametz at the beginning of the 6th hour into the day. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer Eichlin Kal Dalet. The full 4 hours of the morning you can eat chametz, which is essentially what we would call 10 o'clock. V'toilin Kal Hay, and from 10 to 11 you can't eat it anymore, but you can give it to your animals, and it's not prohibited in benefit yet. V'sar from Tchilas Vav, and at the beginning of 11 o'clock, beginning of the 6th hour is when you burn it. So according to Abai, that said in the first interpretation that Rabbi Meir, according to Meir, people don't make any discrepancies when looking at the sun, and they know exactly what time it is. So let them eat chametz the entire 6th hour as well, 11 o'clock all the way up to noon, and then they'll burn the chametz right then. And even if you say that no, they do make a little bit of a mistake, so let them eat, I don't know, to 10 minutes before noon. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, that said in the first interpretation, the Adam that a person makes a half-hour mistake, so let them eat until half of the 6th hour, meaning to about 11:30. And even according to the opinion that said that Abaye's interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda, that a person could make an hour and a bit, a sha'o mashu, fine. So let him eat chametz nechel ad seif hey. Let him eat until 11 o'clock. Why is there, according to Rabbi Yehuda, a prohibition of eating chametz already from 10 o'clock? Abaye edus masura lizrizim said no. There's a distinction. Witnesses are precise in their time. They know that they have to give testimony. They're not going to come in and give testimony unless they were very clear about what time, where the sun was, and what time it was. However, chametz, lakol moser. Chametz, we're talking about everybody. Everybody needs to be able to eat chametz and know when they need to stop. There, you have to give them a buffer zone so that they don't make a mistake. Witnesses, if they're coming in to testify, that's where Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda are going to say that people make very little, or at max, according to Rabbi Yehuda, a 1 hour mistake in looking at the sun and knowing what time it is. But because they're giving testimony, so they're being diligent to understand what time it is. V'Rava, and according to Rava, Alibid Rabbi Meir the Adam Tayash Teishais, it says that according to Rabbi Meir, people make 2 hour mistakes, chasar mashu, even a little less than 2. So metchilas heila nechel. So why, according to Rabbi Meir in our Mishnah, are you allowed to eat chametz to the end of the 5th hour? They should not be allowed to eat chametz already 2 hours before noon, so that they don't make a mistake. So the Gemara says no. The reason is because they're not going to make a 2 hour mistake, because you know when the sun is at noon, and because since they only make there's a 2 hour mistake, but 5 o'clock, 5 hours into the day, or an hour before noon and an hour after noon, those are times that people are precise about. They don't make that much of a discrepancy, because they know that the noon hour is when the sun is midday. Because at 5 hours into the day, an hour before noon, the sun is in the east, and at 7 hours in the day, the sun is in the west. So the Gemara says, so why can't they eat in the 6th hour of the day? They know exactly that. They'll be very precise, and they'll know. No, the exact time of noon is hard to tell, because it looks to us at the arch of the sun, it looks like it's it's off to the south, and it looks like it's turning a corner, and it's hard to tell exactly where that turn happens. V'Rava alibid Rabbi Yehuda the Ama Adam Tayash Gimel Shais, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, by Rava's interpretation, that people can make up to a 3 hour mistake in the day, chasamashu, a little bit less. So metchilas dalad lenechel. So why does he say that you have to stop eating at the end of 4 hours of the day, the beginning of the 5th hour, really at the beginning of the 4th hour, they should stop already, because the 4th hour, 5th hour, and 6th hour are the times that a person can make a mistake. So Gemara says again, here too, it's the same logic. Chama since a person can tell when the sun is getting close to noon, because at that point the shadow is going to change. In other words, the shade, the angle of the sun is going to be from the east 4 hours into the day, meaning 2 hours before noon. For sure, they know it's still morning, and more than that, you don't need testimony. Since the time of prohibition is at noon, so that discrepancy is not going to be more than 2 hours, because they're not going to make a mistake of noon any more than that. Well, if that's the case, that they can tell at 5 hours into the day, meaning an hour before noon, they know it's still before noon because the sun is casting shadows from the east. Well, then even 1 hour before is enough to stop. Why do you have to stop 2 hours before? So Tirgama Abaya, Libi the Rava. So Abaya explains, according to Rava, the reason is because Eidos Mesurila's reason. By witnesses, that's given to people who are diligent. They'll know the time properly. Chametz lakol moser. But again, this idea that since we're talking about for everybody, chametz is a prohibition that everybody has to be careful about, and so the Chachamim gave a time to make sure that even people who are not so knowledgeable about time are going to not make a mistake and eat chametz when it's prohibited. Rava Amar, and Rava himself explained, Lavai in the time of Rabbi Yehuda. That's not the reason for Rabbi Yehuda, because they're going to make a mistake and think that it's noon already when it's before noon. Rather, Rabbi Yehuda is a different reason, because the only way to destroy chametz, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is by burning it, and so you need time to set up a fire. And so the Chachamim said, start the burning 1 hour before the prohibited time, so you have time to gather the fire and to make the fire, and for it to take hold, and the chametz will be burnt. Esavei Ravina. So Ravina challenged Rava. Amar of Yehuda. Rav Yehuda said, and there's a brayso that says, Rav Yehuda said, when is the time to burn the chametz? When it's not the exact time to burn it and to get rid of it. Even though I said that the only way to do it is by burning it, but really that's when you have time. But when it comes to the moment that you got to get rid of your chametz, get rid of it. However, Elama Rava, so rather Rava said, you're right. It's not in order to gather a fire, a wood, and make some fire. But rather, it's on account of a cloudy day. When it's sunny, it's easy to tell when it's exactly noon. And so you don't need time. An hour before is plenty. But on a cloudy day, it's hard to tell. So then why do you have to stop eating chametz at only at 4 hours into the day? If it's a cloudy day, you may mistake noon already earlier. Said no. People eat their brunch by 4 hours into the day, and people their body knows, oh, it's eating time, so they're not going to think it's noon. Then they're not going to miss that time. So that's a time that it's proper to say, okay, eat your meal, and then since your body is used to it, you know this is the time, and you will stop to burn the chametz.